Hey everyone, it's MetaGamesGX here, and we're going to be talking about the best tech options in branded Despia for this new June 2025 format. We did a lot of deck building the last month because of the new just format with Mitsurugi and Maliss taking over, and then there were multiple different tops at all the nationals over the last month, whether it was the Venezuela Nationals, the Dutch Nationals, or even the Greek Nationals. All of these events had Branded take top spots. Brand is back and better than ever, and with new support on the horizon, I wanted to check out what the best cards that you can be running in Branded right now and discuss some of the other options that we've used in the past and maybe talk about why they aren't as good right now and why maybe these newer techs are even better. So I do want to talk about those, and if you guys want to see more videos like this is going to be an in-depth video, guys. Because of course we're just updating things. We did do a full tech guide. If you guys want to see that, there's going to be a link down in the description. Leave a comment down below what your favorite tech was, and if this video gets to 200 likes, we'll do a follow-up next month and start making this a monthly series, like best techs of the month for Branded. So with that being said, let's get right into it. All right, so I'm going to go through like my main deck staples, extra deck staples, and side deck staples, and then I want to talk about cards that maybe we should be running that people have asked me about that I'm not currently running, and what I might do in the future, because I know a lot of people have been asking me about cards like Salzban, and we'll talk about that when we get to that. So yeah. Now, in the main deck, this has not changed up too much. It's a bit updated. If you want to see the complete deck list, become a channel member and you get to see that, of course. But I do want to talk about certain things because some people have been asking me about the double Quem. I think double Quem is very good right now in the TCG because of Nibiru. I think that's been basically how it's been explained. There's a lot of Nibiru in the format, whether it is just people using it with a hand trap, and then also your deck already does very well into Nibiru, so that's the thing. But I think having this additional grind game piece to always have is very important, especially when you run double Grand Guignol. Just having another target to summon off the Grand Guignol is very important, so I do like that. Also, I do think that a lot of people have been running the maximum of Cartesia because you always want to see Cartesia, whether it's for dodging hand traps or it's really just one of your best extenders in the whole game, because sometimes it's just like better to normal summon Cartesia if you're going to lose to an Imperm. Like, especially like let's just say you have Cartesia and Luber in your hand and you have like Shrouded or something and you don't want to lose to Droll and Imperm. Well, you could just normal summon the Cartesia, and let's just say you get Impermed. Well, then you can go Cartesia effect on your opponent's turn and then make an Albaz fusion if you have the Albaz in hand or a way to access it. So it's just, and even going second right now because of like Blue Eyes and then also into Mitsurugi, it does force interaction, like having this card on board even going second. So I think it's not bad as it is. I think the double Quem is the most dubious thing, but I think that, you know, just having that second one is just so good for the grind game as well. So I think that's totally fine. And then I wanted to talk about Bystials, because I think that Bystials are not really, because in the current format for TCG, this could obviously change, but this is for the June month. You know, it's Maliss and Mitsurugi. So I don't necessarily really want to be running too many Bystials as of right now, and that's what other people have been doing in Branded, because the Bystials kind of, well, they aren't the best, you know, they aren't extenders. Magnemite going second, you can obviously search an Albaz, a Shrouded, or a Lubellion, which is pretty good. And Saronir obviously can get you to Retribution in the graveyard, which can set you up for a Branded fusion play, or, you know, playing through Omni Negates going second, which isn't bad. But I think as of right now, what are you Bystialing out of the graveyard that's really that impactful, right? Like a Murakamo, I guess, but your opponent's most likely has a prayers in this situation, so they're just going to chain the prayers and they're going to still summon the Murakamo, and then they're going to blow up your Saronir, and then you're going to be down a card. So I think that, you know, we've seen a lot of people cut the Magnema. I think you can still run it if you really want, but I think with like the lack of Fiendsmith and the lack, I mean, there is some Fiendsmith, but just not a whole lot enough to justify it, in my opinion, as much as it was in the last few formats. And then there's just so much Maliss, like, obviously. So with it being basically the second best deck next to Mitsurugi, and then there's just like a bunch of other rogue decks that just don't really care about Bystials, whether it's like Memento, whether it's like Crystron, you know, these other decks that, and also we're having some new decks coming. I think maybe when if Orcust is any good, that might change up a little bit. But as of right now, I'm like currently not running the Magnemite, as you guys know. And then also I'm choosing to not run a maximum of Saronir right now. I think 2 Saronir is good because this card just drawing it in Albaz makes you want to die in TCG, honestly, going first, because if you draw like Thrust, this Albaz plus like no extenders, you're just not chilling. Obviously, this is great to see with high spirits, and I just think Shrouded is a better card overall because Shrouded can get you to a board breaker. And this card isn't really turd skipping or really changing your opponent's end board very much unless you're lucky enough to go against like Live Twin or something. So that's why we're kind of running not as many Bystials. Also, some people wonder why we don't run multiple Lubellion in the TCG. I think Lubellion in the TCG is not as good because you don't have options like Verte Anaconda. Verte Anaconda allows you to make Lubellion into your best extender in the game, because with like any other, with a Luber, you just can pitch a Lubellion, summon Saronir, link off for Verte, but that's currently not a thing. So I think one is just fine. I also think that with the prevalence of Droll and Lockbird, I think that Allura Darkness is actually not quite the play right now. I think a lot of people, we saw Vasilis run Allura Darkness in his top 4 Grease list, which, I think it's still like a fine card. I just think that in a format with Droll in the format, you aren't going to want to play into it more than you need to. And I think that Allure does play into it a bit. So I think running like, 1 and 1 of these plus no Droll is just what I'm on right now. But, obviously you can run Allure if you like deck build properly around it, I think, in my opinion. So that's always just something that you can consider. Obviously, I think Branded's very freeform, and with these types of videos, I try to give you guys more suggestions than anything. This isn't anything definitive. And in terms of the branded engine that I'm running, this has basically become the standard engine in the TCG for the most part. The 3 branded openings, 1 branded in red, 3 branded high spirits. I think branded high spirits is such a staple at 3 in TCG because, once again, you don't have Verte and you don't have multiple branded fusions. So I think this card obviously allows you to play through hand traps infinitely. This is one of your best cards to see going first, and going second, it's very good too because you can set up a Titaniclad play while getting you to branded fusion, so that you can like play through your opponent's board with the rest of your hand. And if you can't quite finish up the board, you have the Titanclad at least in the end phase to get you a Mirror Jade guaranteed, basically. And that's also why we run the double Mirror Jade, honestly, which is something that, I've been seeing a lot of people in Master Duel running 1 Mirror Jade, but I think in TCG 2 Mirror Jade is just way too good because you can do plays like this where you can go high spirits, like break the board, and then break the board even more through Titanclad, and you can always like just sacrifice a Mirror Jade to break the board and then summon a new Mirror Jade. I think having the 2 Mirror Jade is just way too crucial when you're doing plays like when you're like leaning more on high spirits in TCG. And then also we are running the obviously branded fusion, bring it back to 2 Konami, and then the standard right here. But I think banishment is kind of non-standard, I guess, but we've been seeing it be ran basically in every branded list, I think, nowadays, at least in TCG, because this card makes it's such a good grind game piece. Speaking of Mirror Jade, it can just revive Mirror Jade through a Nibiru at the very least, which is your play usually if you get nibbed, is you'll just like set banishment, revive this, and then you can hopefully fuse off your opponent's board into like a Masquerade or, a Despia Quertus or like a Stapelia or something like that. So then you also have the Light and Darkness Dragon Lord. Obviously, this card is just utterly broken, honestly. This card, I use it in Master Duel and in TCG. I think it's a little bit worse in like something like a Tenpai format. I think like Tenpai, you want to just like lock them, frankly, or just like hand trap them. But I think for the most part, most decks cannot play through this. Like Mitsurugi can't play through this. Maliss can't play through this. They aren't like a deck with a bunch of gas can play through this, but most of the decks aren't even on like Kashtira's, for instance. So like Kashtira's are really good into Light and Darkness Dragon Lord, so because people aren't really running Unicorn too much, which is a reason not to run double Mirror Jade. But once again, I think it's just really utility to have the double Mirror Jade outside of just the Unicorn banish. But I think this card, the Light and Darkness Dragon Lord, ends up being our best 1-card combo through Aluber. I've showed this off a million times, so if you haven't already seen that combo, I'll link the combo guide in the description of my video, as I always do. But one card of Luber can take one branded fusion and make a Light and Darkness Dragon Lord plus a Mirror Jade plus a Mercurier, which is just like 6 plus interruptions plus follow up off of one card. So yeah, I think Lad and Banishment really justify it. But I think we've seen some people even run Banishment without the Lad because you can once again make cards like Stapelia, Masquerade. You can make any level 8 or higher, fusion. So your options are endless given your extra deck. So and then obviously just for the grind game, reviving the Mirror Jade, reviving the Sanctifier, right, or reviving the Stapelia. I've revived Stapelia actually a lot off the Banishment grind games, frankly. So you can't revive Light and Darkness Dragon Lord, but that's besides the point. And that's the nice thing about Lad too, because you can make it off of Cartesia, which is just like the way to play around Bestials. I think a lot of people have to remember that with like branded, that you can play around Bestials with Cartesia very easily because you can fuse with Cartesia, like make the Lad, make the Sanctifier, and then if you're under Lost, like you can just go Sanctifier, play around the Bestial that way. Or with the Lad, you can play around just getting Bestialed or called by on the Banishment if you know they have it. So always try to have like a Cartesian rotation. That's why we have Cartesia 3, because it just helps you facilitate playing around hand traps so well. So I hope that it's a pretty good explainer on the branded stuff. I'm not running double branded in red because it's sometimes just bricky, and I'm on 50 cards in this build. 51 cards, actually. I think in TCG, you have to be around 50 cards because you have to see branded fusion, and you also have to see Mulcharmy. I think, like, branded, it is a top 10 deck, in my opinion. Like, especially if you know what you're doing, it could be a top 5 deck, but you have to, on some level, still see a Mulcharmy, a Super Poly, or a Droplet, or at the very minimum, a Thrust kind of thing. So you have to see a piece of non-engine. You are probably not playing through any boards with just your engine right now, unfortunately. Whether it's Maliss or Mitsurugi with the rogue decks, you definitely can, like Crystron and stuff like that. You probably can. But that's why you have to run, I think, a 50 card right now, because you have to see like a Mulcharmy or something like that, essentially going second, and just running the consistency to help you go first also just helps you in those situations, so that you can have a deck that's built for going second, for going first, but can also go second very well. The generic pseudo extenders, obviously, I think deployment you have to run because of Verte, and then some people have been seeing cut Foolish and Gold Sark because of Droll. I think these cards are a little bit better because than people make out to be, because Foolish you can play under Droll with very well. You can send Sarnier or Shrouded, which is very good in my opinion. And that because half the time you're getting to branded fusion through just your graveyard. And then Gold Sark is very good, obviously, is one of your best one card starters. If we had it at 2, I'd run it at 2. You can banish either Mercurier or Tragedy, which makes it a lot more flexible than this, so I'd always run this over this, but it does play into draw a little bit more, but it's still just one of your best one-card starters in a 50-card deck. If you just draw like your 2 Mulcharmies, Thrust, and like a High Spirits, and you just need a one-card starter, Gold Sark and like Foolish is great for that. And this is why I'm actually debating on cutting Called By, because I think Called By is just like, you should be able to play through most hand traps, and also we don't have Maxi in this game in TCG, so I think, and even in Master Duel, I've cut Called By because I don't, maybe if I had a side deck, I wouldn't do that in a Maxi format, but I think in a non-Maxi format, I think Called By is not as important in branded, because, okay, you Foolos me, you Perulia me, you Droll me. All these hand traps aren't very good against branded. We talked about this in the branded cast, but one of the reasons why branded is so good right now in the Mitsurugi Maliss format, why it's consistently done well in every big event since Providence, is because which was a month ago in the new format, is because it plays through all the Floodgate hand traps plus Nibiru, which every deck is on, and also you have ways to play around Ash and Impulse. So I think for the most part, if you give yourself a deck that can like play through multiple hand traps with the combo lines, like Called By doesn't help you against Imperm or Impulse either, which doesn't help you in your Malice matchup, which is your hardest matchup, and your Mitsu matchup. Once again, Called By can be okay on the Murakamo going second, I won't lie, but like once again, they'll just have like maybe a Prayers or something like that. So I think this card's kind of useless going second for the most part, and it's just really good when you have a gas hand that kind of just loses to a Ash because you don't have a Thrust, so I'd rather just see the Thrust. So I'm very much debating on cutting Called By right now, just because it is, we play through all the hand traps right now that are going around. If there were more Veilers in the format, maybe I'd consider keeping in the Called By, frankly. But yeah, and then for also, well, I guess we have this for the non-engine. speaking of Molcharmies, I think that Branded's best non-engine lineup right now is 3 Fuelos. I think 3 Fuelos has been standard in every Branded list since I started running it when it first came out, essentially. It's just such a broken card in Branded because it's a high spirits bridge with wing beast because it's a wing beast. So if you draw this plus high spirits, no other extenders, that's full combo, which is exactly why we run the Spriggans kit. I think I saw Mario's list. I don't want to call him out specifically because I love Mario. And he came into the stream. I know some people just said like he essentially said he doesn't like kit. He's a kit hater, so that's like fair. I've seen some people not run kit. I just feel like you need it if you run Fuelos in the main deck for the high spirits line. And then also it's very good for a follow up because if you already use your branded retribution, turn 4 or 5, how are you getting to branded fusion, especially if you've banished it off of the fusion duplication, which does banish the branded fusion. So I think you need Spriggan's kit in order to basically, facilitate a better grind game when you're not running things like double retribution or like branded sword or something like that. So I think that Fulos is great. You want to see that going second, but I also think Perulia is almost as good right now against most of the decks. So I think this is something that I ended up maining at my last regional, and it won me multiple games just having Perulia in the main deck on top of Fulos. So these are just like the best cards in the game right now for the most part in terms of hand traps. And then, obviously, Maliss and Mitsurugi can kind of play around Perulia a little bit, but they still give you a few draws anyways, and they'll get their board, but all you need is a few extra draws essentially to play the game against most of these decks. On a 6-card average Branded head with all engine, you can't really break these boards, but if you get to 7 to 8, you can start actually gassing through that even with just engine. But at that point, you're probably also seeing non-engine, which is just super broken for card advantage. Like, you aren't just seeing hand traps that you're going to nag on your opponent, or like you draw them too late. Essentially, you're seeing cards that will tangibly be able to play through your opponent's board most of the time. So that's why I think Molcharmy is so strong in Branded. Like, the card quality of what you are drawing is insane versus like what other decks are. Obviously, this card kind of sucks if you brick and then you have to use on your opponent's turn. You can't draw hand traps to turn skip your opponent. That is a utility that like other decks have with Molcharmy, but for the most part, you shouldn't be relying on bricks, right? And obviously Branded does brick. I do want to say that with this being a text video, like, best Branded text video. Branded does brick at the end of the day. It's still a deck with, that can't facilitate a lot of these guys, and also it still needs a lot of and because of that, you're going to end up having to run 50-card build, right? I'd love to run a 40-card build right now, but I really can't. Like, I think I could make it to 45 without compromising too much integrity, but you are really just slashing away at the bit of what your deck is doing, and I don't like doing that. I like having more options, so I feel like having the 50-card build, having the Fulos is very important right now, and seeing these cards, so that's why we're running these at such a high amount. We're not running Meowls in the main deck because Meowls just isn't as good as Perulia. Perulia just hits every deck, and also you play around Thrust, which is also a kind of a thing too, which is why like we're not running Bestials too much, because Bestials really do play into the Thrust, and some decks are maining that or just siding that. So this is why I'm running. This helps your going second, and at 50 cards, running 6 Molcharmies on top of the rest of the non-engine you have, which I mentioned, which is 3 Super Poly, 2 Droplet, and 2 Thrust, and in the talents, I guess in a duplication, but that's going first. These cards, just like, as long as you see one of these cards going second, you're probably in business against most decks, because Super Poly against like Maliss or Mitsurugi, obviously you just clear their best 2 their Omni Negate plus whatever their other interruption is that's a Cyberse on their board with Super Poly. And then also Droplet is very good against most decks. I think it's just interacts very well with the Branded deck because you can go like Fusion Deployment, they chain, you can chain Droplet, send the deployment, and then you end up like having like not really negging too hard on the Droplet, and it's also a quick play. So I think quick plays that can't be responded to are the best in Branded for the most part. I think they're the best board breakers in general, and which is why you see these cards consistently ran. And then obviously Thrust is good going first and going second. We aren't running 3 in this build. I could go to 3. I just think it's for consistency. If you're running 6 Molcharmies plus 3 Thrust and then 2 Droplet, 3 Super Poly at 50, you're going to be bricking a lot, honestly. So like, that's why I'm trying to up my like 1-card starter like rate. I'm running Foolish, I'm running Gold Sark, I'm not running the Called By, but these cards also just, if I see these going second, I win the game, and I want to see one of these cards or 2 of these cards ideally basically every game. So that's why I'm running, basically just this package. I want to see at least 2 of these cards every game going second, and then hopefully, the rest of the cards are essentially extenders in this deck. So hopefully I'll get there with them. You know, there's a couple bricks I think that you have to run to facilitate certain things like banishment. I think banishment makes your combo line so much better and it really helps your grind game. So I would never cut banishment for that part, but I think droplet's just way too good. Thrust, you know, it's just a balancing act with branded deck building. You have to make sure you have enough starters to your bricks essentially. That's what I'm doing with this kind of build, and I think Perulia is just so high quality. I'm even running it in Master Duel at this point. I think this card is just card advantage is so crazy in branded. Like, we used to run Pot of Desires for a reason before Branded Fusion went to 1. I'm back to running it in Master Duel, but it's at 1. So now with Branded Fusion 2 at 2 in Master Duel. But yeah, no, so that's why I think these cards basically do that. They get you your card advantage going second, and they even have the added benefit of mangling your opponent's end board because they can't make a as good of an end board. Like Pod Desires got you a +1, but this card also says to your opponent, here's your +1, and you end on a weaker board, right? So I think these cards are arguably even better than Desires in our deck. And obviously Perulia is not a high spirits bridge. You could run the Rule Kalos if you want to be like nuts and run like a tier limit build, but I think it's super bricky, that kind of build, at least in the TCG. So I still think this is fine. And then going, like, some people have asked me about side patterns. Like, I think obviously going first, you just side out these 6 cards and branded, and then you end up putting in cards that work going first. These are my sides in my current deck for the Mulcharmies, basically, because these cards are really good going first. Even Droll is good going first against basically every deck, honestly. Even Maliss, like, which is a really underrated interaction. Like, Droll isn't terrible into Maliss because even going second, like, if you draw this, you can draw them. They can't draw their 4 or 5 cards, so they can't draw hand traps against you, which is pretty good if you could, because then a Super Poly just deals with everything, essentially. But for the most part, obviously, you have to run this for Mitsurugi. But for the most part, this will also go in going second for certain side patterns. But I think Droll is also a very acceptable going first card because at least if you brick or you can end on this and hopefully turn skip your opponent, or even more importantly, you can draw this in your opening hand with starters, and then you can just end on your board plus Droll, and then you can Droll them and they basically die. It's basically like maxing your opponent. Honestly, it's like having maxi on an end board. It's kind of that broken of an interaction in my opinion. So I side that in going first. I think you have to have like proper side patterns when you run the Mulcharmies for going first and going second, because you don't want to have the Mulcharmies in your deck going first. Obviously. So then 2 fusion duplication. This is something I talked about Mario with in our last branded cast. Check that out. Also linked down in the description. This card's crazy. It's our best, like, I think going first extender. Like, you can run things like Dragon's Mind or like Solemn Strike and stuff like that. We'll talk about them. I do have them in this pile, but I think Fusion Duplication is just like such a good card going first that it ends up warranting the side deck slot. A lot of people are like, why would you run multiple Fusion Duplication? You already have one. You only run to resolve one. Well, what if you hard open it and you have a way to branded fusion and you get hand trapped? Well, then you have it. It's also a great end board piece, right? And you just want to see it going first. Going first, you're always trying to resolve branded fusion, and about 80% of the time, you probably are. So this card ends up being, and this card probably is live about 90% of the time because your brand fusion will be in the graveyard. If it got ashed, okay, well then great, fusion duplication. There isn't enough mirror matches to make this ultra broken like in Master Duel, but I do think that, you know, this card makes also the lock very good because you can send Ido directly off the fusion duplication because this card resolves branded fusion. And if you have a light spellcaster in rotation, you can immediately make the Sanctifier and then just revive the Ido you just sent off the fusion duplication and lock your opponent just off the fusion duplication. Once again, as long as you have a light spellcaster in rotation, that's all that's required at that point to send Ido, make Lubalion, make Sanctifier. Just make sure the light spellcaster's in graveyard or banishment or field at that point. So yeah, no, fusion duplication is just so good. It gives you an end board through hand traps. Like, what else would you want going first? Like in a floodgate? Like, this could be D barrier and Sanctum, but okay, you aren't generating any advantage, and if your opponent hand trapped you, well, I guess you're on top deck now. This card says, okay, I'm getting an end board plus follow up, basically, that can interact and stop you from playing the game. And I think with Ido in the game, it makes duplication very good. I think a lot of people just don't know that line where you just do duplication, make Ido, which is just so broken because your opponent can't interact with it, especially if you're like if you let them normal summon and then they can't imperm you. So it's just so easy. And that's why I would run those. I think Droll's required. I was maining it, but this card's a neg 1 at the end of the day. It is a high spirits bridge, which is a plus, but it is a neg 1 at the end of the day. So that's just my issue with like the just like you want to go plus in card advantage with branded because you already have to go neg with card advantage to get to branded fusion with like high spirits and opening and stuff like that. So in your fusion deck, you're already going neg inherently. So I think like having the droll on the side for the matchups where it matters is good instead of just having it in the main deck where you just neg. You drolled your opponent, it doesn't even matter. You want to let your charmies do the work, honestly, and then let this do the work in the matchups where it matters. Some people are like, oh, this conflicts with Mulcharmy. I think a lot of really good players have just come to the realization that this card is a utility card, whether it's like you get Mulcharmied and you droll your opponent, which is very good. This is why it's good going first in branded too, because if they Mulcharmy you and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to droll myself, so they get one draw, but I'm not, you only have to get your lost draw search at that point if you have branded fusion. So now they aren't drawing, I can make full combo, and that's what a lot of people are doing as well. It's a good going first called by almost card around Mulcharmy, but also because getting double Mulcharmy sucks no matter what deck you're playing, even branded for the most part. So, I mean, it's not as bad as Brandon. I think Brandon has the best Mulcharmy lines, which is once again why it's a meta contender because it can play through Mulcharmy Droll just very easily. Like, even if you have Droll plus Mulcharmy, okay, well, you Mulcharmy them, get a few draws, and then you Droll them on an angle where it turn skips them. That happens a lot, I think. It doesn't happen every situation, but it's definitely something that can happen. So I think that's also why you run both, in my opinion. They're just the best hand traps in the game. Like, people are calling for Droll to be banned. People want Chummy to be banned somehow already. Droll, I can see why it's been out for so long, but this card also just like stops Mitsurugi. This is like your only hope against Mitsurugi, honestly. So, all right, so now we're gonna talk more about the extra deck and side deck options that I think are the best in branded right now. I think a lot of people have been running Feather Duster and Lightning Storm recently. I think these cards are the best board breakers. Generally speaking, even not in branded, like in Master Duel, a lot of people just main a Feather Duster in branded because you just need the option, but we have the option to side deck it, obviously, here. And then Lightning Storm is arguably even better because of its flexibility, being able to, destroy attack position monsters. It's really good against Maliss for that reason. So yeah, I definitely just feel like those are staples. I think Meowls is currently the best side deck card against Maliss, and then because it also hits Mitsurugi very well, you get a few draws off of them and then other decks, and then it basically just really cracks the Maliss on board without, they're gonna have to give you a lot of draws without, mangling their board. And then also Spooky Dogwood is something that I've seen be ran too. I think this is, I mentioned this before, but I think this is something that we probably should have ran before in branded. I think branded, when you lose the die roll, you have a time issue essentially, because then game 3 when you're going second, most likely if you didn't win game 1 and you didn't see like your non-engine, we like to see 2-0s obviously, but it's not always that easy. I think this card helps you in that situation. It also like somewhat in the game 2s where you can like actually just like dogwood your opponent on turns you brick or something, and then they can't kill you, and then you can kill them. It's not horrible in that situation, so this could be like a chummy side out, like a Perulia side out. And then Lancia is arguably fine against Maliss. They have the Adignister cards now, which helps them play through Lancia, but on a lot of hands, they still just like don't end on a lot through Lancia. So I think as a branded player, you just need these kinds of blowouts. So I think Lancia is still just a fine side deck card, but I think overall you could potentially side this out or even side something like a Phantasme because it is a dark dragon, and I think the fact it's a dark dragon makes it a bit more synergistic than Lancia. Obviously, Lancia you can send off a branded fusion and you can revive it off a Sanctifier. The line's not really that optimal, and then also you can set this off a Sanctum, but we talked about why Sanctum might not be the best play. In Phantasme, once again, it gets you a body, it forces interaction, it gets you some draws, and also has a protection on it. And it's a high spirits bridge, it's a dark, so it's an allure bridge. So I think that Phantasme is arguably just better than Lancia right now in branded for the most part for the Maliss matchup, because that's what you want Lancia for. So if you're going to side Lancia, maybe just consider siding Phantasme. I also think a lot of people have been, debating on cards like Solemn Strike. Once again, Sanctum, I'm not too big of a fan of, but then also we have the Dragon's Mind. I think Dragon's Mind is very good right now. It's basically just a better Solemn Strike in our deck. This card basically says when spell trap or monster effect is activated while you control a monster with 2500 original attack or defense, you can negate it and destroy it, and then if it's in your graveyard, you can pay 2500 to set this card but then banish it. So it comes back. It's nice recurrence, which is really good in my opinion, but also it's just basically about, I mean, Solemn Strike is really good because you don't have to have a monster on board. This requires a monster on board, but you probably will get one, so this one's a little bit one more. So it's just kind of like preference at that point, but I do think that Dragon's Mind recurability is very good. D-Barrier and Sanctum I just don't think do enough right now, with Malice and Mitsurugi being the best decks. Like if you call this against Mitsu Ryzeal, they just go Ryzeal. It's very good against the pure variant though, so if you see a lot of pure in your area, that could always be a consideration. A lot of people have been talking about, you know, Ad-lib or the lock. I think the lock you don't necessarily have to run, but I do think it helps, once again, to play through things like Foolos. You know, if you get Foolos, you could also just make the Mirror Jade line, but you give them 2 draws. If you get double Foolos, you give them 4, which is way too much in my opinion. So I think you could just make Sanctifier and then obviously send this off with the Cartesia that hopefully you have in your hand that you already like have on board or something. And then if not, you can just still give them 1 draw with the Sanctifier, and in my opinion, that is probably just fine. So in my opinion, I still like Sanctifier. I know a lot of people have been cutting this in the TCG. There's still a few, you know, Dutch Nats and Venezuela Nats both ran these, so I think it's just like 50-50 if you run this or not. I think you lose certain games if you don't have this though. Like I've had multiple games against like White Forest or something, these decks with a ton of gas where you just need Ido to shut them down essentially if they've hand trapped you a lot. It happens with like gassy hand trap decks, to be honest. Ad-lib is pretty good, but I think that running the double Jade is typically better speaking, and I think Ido is just a better target. So, because I don't think you really need Ad-lib to win the game. I think it's really good to like recycle a Mirror Jade though if you only run 1 and it's a dark, so it could be an allure target. I think Albalinatus is not that good right now anymore because of the fact that Blue Eyes isn't as good. Like, yeah, Blue Eyes just top 8 the French Nats, but like it's still quote unquote rogue. It's still like a top 5 to 10 deck, but I don't think it warrants maining or siding Albalinatus anymore. I think you can win against that deck with Super Poly into Chaos Star Source Dragon, because in the TCG you get to pop 2 cards when you use your opponent's monsters, unlike Master Duel in the OCG. So the Super Poly into Chaos Star Source play is just way more devastating. You basically win the game on the spot if you do that. So I don't think Albalinatus is necessary exactly in the TCG like it is in Master Duel at the moment with how much Blue Eyes is out there. I think Guardian Chimera is very good, but I've seen a lot of people start cutting it in favor of just like running more extra deck options. Like I like Stapelia a lot right now. I've seen a lot of people cut that, but I just can't see myself ever cutting it. I think Masquerade you need for like time and Malice and TCG, but then also I think things like double Guignol and then also the double Mirror Jade is extraordinarily important in branded at the moment. And then also if you choose to run the Sanctifier for a Mulcharmy line, things start getting really tight. So that's why things like Borreload and Chimera have started to get cut, but I think they're just fine. I think there's just not a ton of stun in the TCG because, you know, the TCG R&D department actually knows what they're doing, and they're starting to actually ban fucking cards that like floodgate your opponent and stuff like that, unlike Master Duel. So these cards aren't as necessary in my opinion. I think Chimera is great in the grind game. I think this is a great bridge into Light and Darkness Dragon Lord because it's a dark dragon, so you can make Chaos plus this, get 3 pops, and then make a Lad, which is very good, especially under Shifter, but Shifter's only at 1, so it's not really a factor anymore. And then also like the double Jade if you want to play around Unicorn. We did mention that Unicorn isn't that prevalent, but I do think it's still very good. And then we have the Despia and Quertus, which is something I've gone back and forth with because of things like Proskinion being very good right now. I think, you know, we've seen a lot of people start running Despia and Proskinion and branded because it requires a Despian plus a light and dark, so you can use it as a super poly target and, you know, then revive, you know, go nutty on your opponent essentially because you get to, you know, Despian Proskinion is very cool because you get to summon this off of Guignol. I think you need a target for when you're running double Guignol. Yeah, you're running the double Quem, but I think you need a target in the extra deck for both Guignol, so the first Guignol can summon out the second Quem, and then the second Guignol can summon out Proskinion or Quertus. I think you need one of them. And then also they're very important super poly targets. I think that you have to actually just like either run Masquerade or a Quertus in the main deck because of the fact that you need something for Super Poly, essentially, because Super Poly when you go like normal summon like a Luber, for instance, and your opponent imperms you and you have a Super Poly in hand, you need something to chain Super Poly to Super Poly your Luber to dodge the imperm so you can still get your search because it won't be on field for the imperm to negate on the resolution of the chain. So you need either a Despia Quertus or a Masquerade, in my opinion, because both of them require a Despia plus a light or dark. So those are the most generic, like, super poly targets. With a Luber, a lot of the time, you will be able to just super poly off one of your opponent's monsters, or you can set it up where you already have, like, a Bestial on field, so you can just super poly it anyways. I think that Masquerade's a bit better. I think Proskinion doesn't always work for that also, so that's why I think Proskinion is a little bit less necessary than Quertus or Masquerade. I think Proskinion is overall a better card in the grind game, honestly, than Quertus or Masquerade, because this card constantly revives. It also can burn for like a ton of damage, so it's very good at OTKing, and it's a big body. It's 3200, so it's hard for your opponent to get over. It's very good for that reason. That's why I think I like it off of the Guignol a ton. It's just something that you have to consider when you're running Super Poly, just having the Quertus or Masquerade, because if you only have Proskinion and your opponent has a light or dark and they have Imperm and you have Super Poly but you don't have a target, you're going to be looking very silly, and it comes up more than you'd think. I know that sounds very specific, but that's why I would run one of these, and then you could consider the Proskinion. I think Proskinion's very good because you can take like things like Abaku. Like I did that against a Live Twin player, and it was devastating. I got to pop one of his monsters and then revive my Albaz. It was absolutely crazy. But it's a little bit win more in that case. Like, but I do think like things like Stapelia I saw on the way out. I think it's a little bit more utility though, because if you only have Guignol plus a Dark and Graveyard, you have like red. I think you need like Stapelia. Also, I think you need another end board piece besides Mirror Jade in this kind of deck, besides like Rinbrum and the Light and Darkness Dragon Lord, which is something like you have to consider, because yeah, Light and Darkness Dragon Lord's great, but you can't make it off of Albion. You need like a quick play effect that can be used on multiple turns essentially, besides Mirror Jade. Besides Lad, essentially. So that's why I think Stapelia is what I'm going to do. I think it can't be Masquerade in that slot. It can't be Quertus in that slot, obviously. It could be Boral in that slot. It's Boral or Stapelia. I don't think it can be Chimera, because Chimera is only made off of red, so that doesn't solve that. I think Chaos Star Source is a one and done kind of thing, so I want to have this in the pocket. Also, it's very good to just have this in the pocket when you're, when you have a Cartesia or like Branded Banishment too, because this could be made off of those, or Fusion Duplication. Pop cards on your opponent's turn, which is why a lot of people have cut Guardian Chimera. I've actually considered running double Star Source in Master Duel, because just having the option in grind games to like constantly be popping is very good. So that's something we can maybe consider down the line in TCG. We also have Garura, which is a great Super Poly target right now. I think that, Garura is a great Super Poly target because you could fuse off the Mitsurugi end board, the two rituals, or you could fuse off the Maliss end board. And then you can get a draw. Also, you could send this off of one of your Guignols to get a draw, which is very good utility off the bat. I think Starving Venom is something that people have been running over this, though. I think Starving Venom is good, but it really only comes up in certain situations. And this comes up against more decks than Starving Venom. So once again, it's just the tight extra deck. What do you value? Do you value the second Mirror Jade? Do you value the Starving Venom, right? So that's what the side deck is for, because you could always run it there. I would love to run a Sprine, right? This card's great. It's a great Albaz target. To fuse off anything your opponent has. It would be great against all the weird Cashier cards, right? Because it makes it a super poly target against those, but I do want to also, like, we just don't have the space, so that's just like, for instance, on that kind of situation. And then for the rest of the miscellaneous staples I wanted to talk about, we have the Golden Sword Soul. This card's great into Maxi and into Mulcharmy, but the thing is, there's no Maxi in our format, so I don't think we need it as necessarily here, but it's great, definitely, because if you send this off a Sanctifier, off a Brand Diffusion, you get Mulcharmied, and you have, like, a Cartesia Shrouded in rotation, you basically make Lad plus Mirror Jade under the Mulcharmy with the Sanctifier, which is really good. So this card's just really good into hand traps. Just not enough Maxi to justify, in my opinion, the TCG. Uka was very good because of all the Fiendsmith, because you could summon Ecclesia from your main deck when your opponent, like, special summons a Lacrima off of the Requiem, and then you can summon Ecclesia, make a Mirror Jade, and then get Brand Diffusion off the Mirror Jade plus a Banish on your opponent's turn and an end board piece. Very devastating play against, like, any, like, kind of deck. And then also there's Ryzeal off of Ice, and then Blue Eyes, obviously. So this could still be in your side deck if you have a lot of Fiendsmith around you. But if you don't, I would probably say you don't need to Side it, definitely don't main it. Lulu Wall Lilith is good for the grind game, obviously. It's also nice for Nadir. Nadir just went to 3 in Master Duel, but I still don't think it means it's that great in the TCG. I think there's just better options to play Branded at a higher level than Nadir. Nadir does help you play through hand traps, and it's a good card, but I think with one Branded Fusion, I just don't think Nadir is the play right now. And then some people were asking me about the Shadal package. Shout out to all my Shadal lovers. We're going to have to do an updated Shadal branded list. So, guys, get this video to 200 likes. We'll also do an updated Shadal branded list. This card is great, too, because, like, I've seen nets run, like, a tier limit Shadal branded list where you run, like, a couple Shadal cards with Ep Cologne and, like, a Winda and, like, Construct. Construct ends up being a High Spirits Bridge for the Despian Tragedy, which is something that you don't typically end up seeing, and so that's pretty good. But it ends up being way too much extra deck space. You have to run like one Mirror Jade, one Albion, like, you know, stuff like that, and just like make weird concessions. That's not, in my opinion, that good, because going second, if you see the, you know, tier limit and Shadal cards against Maliss and Mitsurugi, you just lose unless the card's like a Shadal fusion, literally. And those cards are kind of bricky. Winda's great going first as like an onboard piece. It's kind of basically like a gimmick puppet, and you can run Shadal Schism for that reason. App Clone is a great send off of the Grand Guignol. I just think this isn't the format for these cards, but, you know, definitely can be ran if you deck build correctly around them, and it can be successful, I think. Could even throw in some King of the Swamps in there to make like Roll Kaloslav. Mud Dragon. Some people ask me, like, why is this a good Super Poly target and branded right now? I don't think so. There's not a whole lot of decks that this goes into at the moment, unfortunately. Maliss, Mitsurugi are very uniform in their typing. Dark Reptile, Dark Cybers. This could be okay into the Abaku board, but overall it's just not worth the slot at all. And then Deception, you know, if we're running the Azamina package, I think I'd want to run for the new Dark Magician. I want to wait for the new Dark Magician support, because then I get double Omni Negate on top of my Azamina package. So that's something to consider once that comes out. But for right now, I think this card's not great. Into all the removal, whether it is the Maliss deck, I think also the Ryzeal Mitsurugi deck can just remove this very easily. So I think going second, this card isn't great. And then going first is good against hand traps, but I think overall you already play into hand traps pretty well because you're branded. The current crop of hand traps and all the hand traps right now are floodgate hand traps, so they can just hit you before you establish the Sylvia anyway, so it doesn't even matter. Dark Ruler No More is something I've seen some people like band-aid around for this format. It's like okay into Mitsurugi, it's okay into Maliss, but I think for the most part, like, Mitsurugi will just trap Omni Negate this if this is game 2 or 3, and then you can't OTK them, which you want to like at least give yourself that option, or at least like be able to set up a lock plus Masquerade. That's also just the thing. Your win cons going second with branded, it's either locking your opponent, OTKing them, or masquerading them and putting them on a little, essentially, or just like making it on board they can't play through. That's always like your forward things. And like Dark Ruler just kind of plays around. It used to be like a one-stop shop against Kashira. That's why we ran it. Not anymore. Tikaboo is something I thought pulled out randomly. I think Tikaboo could be pretty good right now into Maliss and Mitsurugi, because they can only control one typing. So this just like shits on Maliss, and then also against pure Mitsurugi, this is incredible. Against the Ryzeal variants, pretty shit. So something to consider, though. It could be worth like the one slot as just a blowout against Maliss going first. And then Grass. I love Grass in the TCG and Master Duel in general. I think this card's crazy. But in TCG, you're just heavily incentivized to run a 50 card branded build, and this, you can run this at 52, 54 cards. It's just worse. So that's just like when you're not building your deck also, because I'm not running branded in white. I don't think branded white's that good. That's why you didn't see in this video, because branded white's basically just kind of bricky. If you see that card, you're gonna end up bricking a lot of the time. It's just a grind game piece, and honestly, I'd just rather see my Fuloses and stuff like that, and then rely on my other engine to play it, because I'm already running a lot of consistency in this build. So yeah, Grass is very good. I just, right now, I think it's the time in TCG until we get like 2 branded fusion back at least. And then Cross-Out Designator / Salesban. This will be the last card I discuss, because a lot of people were asking me about Salesban. I think Salesban's very good. I think that Salesban, ever since YCS Providence, has proven itself to be one of the best side deck cards in the whole game right now. You can basically, it can be used going first or going second, whether it's a board breaker, so you can call Murakamo or a detonator so they can't activate their effects, or going first, you can call a hand trap that you know you're going to lose to. You know, you look at your hand, do you lose to Droll? Well, I guess you lose to Droll but not Ash. Like, okay, well, we're calling Droll. Well, you look at your new hand, you lose to Ash here, you call Ash, right? Or you lose to Imperm, basically, like exactly Imperm, like then you call Imperm, right? So that's why I think that like Sal's ban is very good right now, and I actually recommend it. I'm right now running it in my new branded build. Don't have any copies on me, I gotta buy them. But yeah, no, Sal's ban's very good in branded. We talked about this on a short, so definitely something that you can run in branded. It's the new crossout designator, right? So obviously, like you can't call D barrier, but no one's really on D barrier. That was the upside of crossout over it, but you can call everything else, which is pretty good. And it's also arguably like more of a board breaker than crossout is. So with that being said, guys, that was a long video yapping about the best techs in branded this month. What was your favorite one? Leave a comment down below. Leave a like if this video gets to 200 likes. We'll do a follow-up next month. And with that being said, we'll be seeing you guys later. Subscribe today, too. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers. Click the bell. 50% of you guys are not subscribed already, so make sure you are subscribed. Leave a like down below. It helps the algorithm. And remember, I do love you guys. Stay safe and have a good rest of your day. Bye now.